Okay, students, let's take a look at finding the inverse of a matrix using Excel, and we're going to have Excel do the row operations for us. So as we saw previously in this lesson, the way that you find the inverse of a matrix, kind of a standard way, is to use Gauss-Jordan elimination, and we're going to start with that. So I'm going to augment the matrix that I have to begin with the identity matrix. So I have the matrix 8, 3, 5, 2, and I'm going to augment that with the identity matrix 1, 0, 0, 1. And then we do row operations trying to convert the matrix, the starting matrix. So we start with the identity matrix here on the left, and that will give us the inverse. So what I need to do is, again, I want to turn that top number into a 1, and ideally want to make the rest of the rows 0. But let's do things a little bit different this time. Since 8 and 5 aren't so easy to work with, I got to work with fractions. Let's just leave this an 8 for now. So I'm going to leave this top row alone. And what I'm going to try to do is try to make the bottom row a 0. But what I can do is I can do sort of any common multiple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take -5 times row 1 and add it to 8 times row 2. So I'm going to take 8 times the value that's, well, I'm going to take 5 times the 8. That's going to give me 40. And then actually I want to subtract. No, I did -5. Okay, so that should work. So -5 times h2, -5 times the 8 that's in the first row, which gives me -40. And I'm going to take the bottom row and multiply it by 8. So 5 times 8 will be +40. And when I add those together, I should get 0. Let's see. Yes, we get 0 in there. Okay, but of course, if I do that calculation, I want to carry that calculation over through the whole row. So I'm going to highlight those first 2 rows and drag all the way across, and that will give you 8, that will do the calculations for you. We'll do that row operation of -5 times the first row plus 8 times the second row to get the 0 there. All right, so that's all matched up just the way I want it. Oh, and I ended up with a 1 in the second row. Perfect. I got a 1 down here in the second row, second column, right where I want it. What I want to do next is turn the 3 that's right above it into a 0. And so if I take a -3, actually I want the top row to be -3 equals, start with the equal sign, -3 times what's in row 2 and add it to row 1. So I'm going to do just to kind of maybe go back a little bit. That first, well, let's just finish this here. All right, that should stay an 8 still. Whoops, enter. Where am I at? There we are. All right, and then the second row is going to stay exactly what it is. The first one doesn't change because I'm working with a 0 in the bottom row, but I did -3 times 0 plus 8. But if I copy that formula, drag that formula over there, and get the right cursor, and I can hold the mouse down while I drag, it will do that calculation to give me the 0 in this spot. All right, so just to kind of review the operations that I'm doing here, the very first operation I'm doing is I'm going to take -5 times row 1 plus 8 times row 2 and put it back into row 2 spot. What that will do is that'll create a 0. That'll give me this 0 in particular with the one that I want right there. That'll give me that 0. Because -5 times 8 will be a -40. 8 times 5 will be a +40. When I add them together, I'll get 0. Okay, and then the next row operation I'm doing here is I want to take -3 times row 2 add it to row 1, put it in a row 1 spot. So if I'm going to take the 1 here, multiply it by -3, and add it to that 3, I'll get 0. But I have to, when I put that in, I want to do that here in the first row. I don't want to do it in the second row. I want to set that that calculation here in the first row. So I'm going to type in the formula here in that first row as -3 times h6, -3 times what's in row 2, and add it to what's in row 3, row 1. Sorry, to get the 0. All right, and then I copy that formula across. We'll see that this one is -3 times the 1 plus the 15. And if I look at this one, it is also -3 times the 5 plus the 1. So it happened all the way across there, except for I somehow, let me undo. Do I have an undo button? Yep, I do have an undo. I need to move my annotate my pin functions out of the way. There it goes, there to the 8 that we had there. All right, so the next row operation I do, I want to get to the identity matrix, so this 8 needs to get turned into a 1. Oh, and the division all the way across is really nice. So I'm going to take 1/8. Now I want my pin back. I want to do 1/8 times row 1 and put it back into row 1 spot. And that will divide the 8 by 8, which will give me 1. And then I'll be all set because I'll have the 1 in the upper left corner where I need it. So I'm going to take the value here and just divide it by 8. And then the second row, I'm just going to keep that same second row. So I'm going to type equals and then click on the 0 to keep that cell H9 the same. Then we'll go back and highlight those two and then press down and hold the mouse button and drag across to carry those operations all the way across. And so then I end up with our inverse there, that our inverse is the second part of the matrix. I've got the identity matrix to begin with. So the inverse here is going to be the second part of that matrix. Will give me my inverse. So the inverse of our matrix, initial matrix, is 2, -3, -5, 8. All right. And we can double check that the formula with that one, with the formula, right? Remember the formula was 1 over A times D minus B times C. And then the D and the A change spots, and then the other two change signs. So this one stays in the same spot, that one stays in the same spot, but they change sign. And if we double check here that our calculation, AD, 8 times 2 is 16, B times C, 5 times 3 is 15, 16 minus 15 is 1, so it's going to just be 1 times the 8 and 2 change spots, so it's going to be a 2 there and an 8 in that spot. And then the 5 and the 3 change sign, so a -3, -5. And that's exactly what I got doing the row operations in there. But if we need to do it with the row operations, and I may ask on the test to actually show you to do it with the row operations, not with the formula. So be sure that you can do that. All right, let's do another example here. Let me erase all those drawings, clear all drawings, switch over to my new sheet. So here I've got a 3x3 matrix, and I want to find the inverse using the Gauss-Jordan method here in Excel. So we're going to augment with the identity matrix. In this case, it's a 3x3 identity matrix. We're going to augment, add on the identity matrix, add to that matrix there. All right, and then I want to do my row operations. Ideally, I'd like to turn this first number, I turn the -2 into a 1, but that's going to give me fractions the whole way through. And well, I don't mind working with fractions too much. I can also see that if I look underneath that, I've got easy multiples. So if I'm going to just keep that -2 for a minute and get the zeros to start with. So we're going to just keep that first row being the first row, so I'm just gonna say equals B2. The second row, I want to turn the -4 into a 0. So if I take -2 times the value here times that -2 times the value in the first row, add it to the value in the second row, I should end up with 0, right? -2 times -2 is a +4, and a +4 plus -4 should be 0. Yes, and that works out. And then I can get the 0 in the bottom row. I've got -2. Let's take -2, multiply it by 4, and then add it to the value here in the last row, add it to the 8. -2 times 4 would be a -8, added to the +8 should give us 0 there. And yep, that's what Excel calculates. But I don't want to do it just with that first column. I have to do that same calculation all the way across the row. So I'm going to copy, drag, highlight that section and drag it across and do that arithmetic all the way across. Awesome, so that's all set up. Okay, let's keep going here. Let's keep working our way across. I've got a number and then 0, 0 in the first column, just the way I want it. In the second column, well, I've got a -9 here. I'd really like that to be a 1. And I could do, actually, let me go back here just a little bit, just to write down the steps that I did here. What I'm doing to get to this stage is I took -2 times row 1, added it to row 2, and put it in as the new row 2, because a negative times a negative will give me a +2, and when I add them together, I'll get 0 there. And then I did 4 times row 1 plus row 3 to give us a row 3. That gave me the 0 that I ended up down here in this bottom corner, because a 4 times -2 would be a positive -8. And when I add it to the +8 down below it, I would get the 0. And of course, I have to do that calculation the whole way across that row. All right, let's keep going on our matrix here. I want to turn. Well, let's just leave that. Let's leave that first one by itself. It is like it is. What I'd like to get, I think I can see that I can easily, I want to start looking at getting zeros in these two locations if I can. And I think I can do that pretty easy. I can get the 0 down below pretty easy. If I just do row 2 plus row 3, put it in a row 3 spot, that should be a nice calculation to give me a 0 in the bottom row. So I'm going to leave the first row alone at this stage. I'm just going to do that, excuse me, just do that one row operation. Second row is essentially going to stay the same. The third row is going to be row 2, so cell B7 plus cell B8 in there. That would be the row 2 plus row 3. Again, I have to do it here in this first column, even though I really want that to be and happen in the second column. And that's just to get things that allows you to copy this formula all the way across, do that calculation all the way across. So I've got the 2, the 0, 0, the 9, the 0, and then a 5. Okay, so let's keep going here. I don't think. Well, let's go ahead and well, let's start with the 5 down here. Let's turn the -5 into a 1. That's an operation that we need to do. Let's go ahead and do that. And if I scroll up, it looks like my drawing is independent from Excel. So it's going to move to, so I'm going to erase those just so they're not confusing. Let's clear my drawings. All right, we'll get rid of all of those. All right, so let's, what do we want to do? Do you want to go with the one? Well, I can see that if I take 1/3, let's do that. Let's do 1/3. If I divide 9 by 3, I get 3. So I'm going to take 1/3 times row 2 and add it to row 1. That should put it back as a new row 1. That should create the 0 here. If I take 9 and divide it by 3 and add 3, I will get 0 there. So let's go ahead and do that. So I need to, I want to do this row 2 divided by 3 plus row 1. Row 2 divided by 3 plus row 1. That's going to give me the 0 that I need there. Okay. When I'm doing that calculation there in the first row, let's go ahead and just spread that one all the way across. Yes, it gave me the 0 that I wanted. And should we go ahead and fix the second row? What I want to do is I want to take, no, I'm not gonna fix it yet. I'm just gonna leave it at -9. But I can fix the -5. Let's turn the -5 into a 1. It's not exactly, well, it's probably a good next move. So I'm gonna take -1/5 times row 3 and put it back into row 3 again. So for row 3, I'm gonna take the number that's in row 3. So I'm gonna come down here and say equals row 3 divided by -5, or multiplied by 1/5. Row 3 divided by -5. Now, it didn't seem like it changed anything because I'm working with a 0. 0 divided by -5 is 0. So we'll then cross that across. Okay, there, I got the 1. Let's go ahead and get the zeros above that before I divide through by 9. If I divide through by 9, I'm going to get a 2/3 there, but I can get the zeros pretty easily there. So let's just do, let's see, I can turn this -1 that I've got highlighted into a 0. If I just take row 3 plus row 1, row 3 plus row 1, give me a new row 1. And while I'm at it, I'm going to do 6 times row 3 plus row 2 to give me a new row 2, because that'll be 6 times the 1 plus the -6 would give me 0 in there. So those two operations should give me the zeros that I'm looking for in that first row. So in Excel, I'm going to get a new row 1, and I just want that to be row 3 plus row 1. So I'm going to click on those two boxes to add them together. All right, that's going to stay -2. Row 2, am I doing anything? Yes, I'm going to do, row 2 is going to become 6 times what's in, whoops, I need the times, not the raised to a power. 6 times what's in row 3 and add it to row 2 to give me my new row 2. And I'm not doing anything with row 3. Row 3 is going to stay the same. So I'm just going to say equals B16 there to keep that row the same. And we'll copy all the way across. Excel thinks about it a little bit. Yep, I got the 0 here and the -9 there and the 2 in that location. And so we'll scroll up a little bit here. I'm almost done, right? I need to get rid of the -2. 2 last row operations to do. I'm clearing out all my drawings. So we're clear. I need to turn the -2 into 0. So let's just take row 1 and divide it by -2 to give me a new row 1. And let's take row 2 and divide it by -9 to give me a new row 2. Because -9 divided by -9 would give you 1. You can always get to a 1 by dividing through by a constant. Officially, we're only allowed to multiply by a constant, but dividing by multiplying by, -1/2, I'd have to technically multiply by -1/2 in order to do it, but we'll commonly say we're just going to take what's in row 1 and divide by -2. We'll divide by -2. It's the same thing. What's in row 2 is going to get divided by -9, so I'm going to take the number in row 2 and divide it by -9. Oops, not -0, -9. That'd be fun. Your calculator would have all sorts of problems. And row 3 is already perfect with the 0, 0, 1 there, so I'm just going to leave that row 3 equals row 3. And then if I move my cursor down, grab that whole column, copy across, and we are all done. Our inverse matrix would be, we've got the identity matrix leading us off, and so our inverse matrix would be just this matrix. Just pull off leave out the identity part of it. I just want to pull off this chunk here and copy everything down, just leave it exactly the same. So that chunk, that bottom chunk, would be our identity matrix. This piece here would be our identity matrix, or our inverse matrix, sorry, not the inverse matrix. So that is A inverse, our little notation for it would be A inverse there, would be that piece there. Kind of some messy decimals in there, but I think we're going to have to just live with that as the answer. We do end up with decimals fairly often when we're working with the inverse matrices.